Anyway, should I count from 5?
Yeah.
All right. We are going to begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Hello everybody, this is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color. I am Mabdulra, and thank you for tuning in and watching. This category is called All Instruments, so the goal of the category is when you beat the game, you need to have all 8 instruments in your inventory. You can do any bugs and glitches you want. There's no restrictions, it's entirely goal-based. So things are going to get crazy pretty quickly. You're going to see this doghouse right here a lot, so get ready for that. But the first thing we need to do is we need to get our sword, because without that we cannot do any damage to anybody. So getting the sword is fairly simple. We just have to go to the beach. So there's a cutscene with an owl right here. The owl has 3 states to the cutscene. The owl flies in, the owl talks to you, the owl flies out, and between those 3 phases, you can move Link. So doing that, I'm able to pick up the sword between the cutscene. And now we're going to do something called Doghouse Glitch, which is a very specific type of wrong warp. And it's based on the number of enemies I have killed. So with those 2 and the first one there, I have killed 3 enemies, and I need to kill 4. I'm going to skip that Octorok for now. And here comes the 4th enemy. Welcome. So with that, we have 4 enemies killed, and we're going to go right into the doghouse. Depending on the number of enemies you kill, the collisions and the chests you find in the doghouse will be different. So it looks pretty chaotic, but there's an interesting logic to how everything works, and so long as the number of enemies you have killed stays the same, I love that room, by the way, then you can know how collisions are going to work. You're going to know where chests are and what those chests contain, and it's not random, and that's really important to note. When I picked up that chest just now, I did a save and quit, and the reason for that was it skips the dialogue from opening. So the audio here, if you're listening, it sounds absolutely terrible, especially when you're moving between rooms. That's just sort of a side effect of this. So now that's the power bracelet, which allows us to pick things up. Oh, okay. Not quite the path I was going for. So we're going to pick up a few items while we're here. That's the point of going into Doghouse 4. Those are Gomas, by the way. That little pixelated mess. So here's our last item we want to pick up, which is the feather. And with that, we do a save and quit and get out of here. So we're going to pick up one more item, which is the ocarina, which is in the Dream Shrine. You normally need to get the power bracelet for that, which is something we do have. So the Dream Shrine, normally you run around and there's these mimics and they do 3 hearts of damage if you take a hit, but we're going to do something here called a super jump. So we're going to approach this wall and we're going to jump and just do that, which is great.
So did I eat your pie teach you any of these tricks?
Hmm?
Did I eat your pie teach you any of these tricks?
He did not.
Oh.
I'm kind of one of the older runners for this, so I think he started relatively recently.
Yeah, I don't think he's done one run.
I don't think he has.
As much as he's wanted to. Try.
So we killed 3 enemies just now after that save and quit, which puts us in Doghouse 3. Doghouse 3 is super unstable, and there are tiles at the very bottom of the maps that will warp you out of the doghouse. Those little seashell things, if I touch that, it warps you out. So I'm going to move in a sort of specific manner, unless I got stuck here, which I did, so I guess we have to save and quit. Cool. Given that, I'll just reset there, because we had a save and quit recently. So it'll put me back in the Dream Shrine. That's not a big deal. So you get to see this again. Yeah, those enemies do 3 hearts of damage, which is the second most of any enemy in the game. They're just completely random. The most of any enemy is 4 hearts of damage, which would kill Link immediately in this state. Alright, we're going to try that again and get a good clip through. That works. So you see I'm doing these like very specific motions and jumps here because I want to get through these areas and the collision is not obvious. Like, you could go through those key doors, for example, but if you touch those seashell-looking things, you will warp out of the doghouse, which is not what you want to do right now. But you can also manipulate the warp data to take you to different places, and that's my goal right now, is I want to manipulate the warp data to take me to the 4th dungeon. And there's one more chest, which has the power bracelet, but it also has the flippers, which allow Link to swim. So with that, we finished setting up, and we're going to go right into the 4th dungeon first. Here's the boss of the 4th dungeon. They look pretty good in the state. And now I'm going to take that warp, after manipulating warp data, puts me in the 4th dungeon, going to ride that wall, going to pick up the 4th instrument. So that's the first of 8 that we need. This run is pretty wild. So, you could use Doghouse for the wrong warp that I just did, but you can do that wrong warp from any door as long as you enter it from behind. It's just, that's very difficult to do, but we're going to do that right now. So we're going to start swimming, which is why we have the flippers, otherwise Link would just drown and then the game would not be able to do anything. So similar to that super jump we did earlier, we're going to do the same thing but against this wall, and it's called a super swim. And I got it right there first try. And now I just don't have collisions. And I'm going to get the doghouse glitch on this right here. So this looks like a random room, but it's connected to the 3rd dungeon. And with that, we are 2 of the 8 instruments in. So you saw I beat the 4th dungeon, and I ended up in front of the 4th. Or I got the 4th instrument, I ended up in front of the 4th dungeon. This is the 3rd instrument, and I ended up in front of the 3rd dungeon. That doesn't have to be the case. The first 6 dungeons are connected on the same map, and then the 7th and 8th dungeons are connected on the same map as well. So technically, you could pick up the instrument in any dungeon room, as long as the game thinks you entered that dungeon. So if the colors for the tiles look like the 3rd dungeon and the music's the 3rd dungeon music, even if I navigated to the 1st dungeon room, I would still get the 3rd instrument, not the 1st one. So with that, I can manipulate where do I end up in the overworld, and that's pretty nice to know. And I'm going to be doing that quite a lot. Right now, I'm going to go for the 7th instrument. And I know this order seems a little weird, but that recent warp I took sort of corrupted my position data. So when I do this wrong warp, I'm going to end up in a different position. I'm just going to navigate these tiles. Of course. So sometimes you don't end up where you want to end up, but that's no big deal. So with that, I can kill 3 enemies again, or I can just kill 2, because for the 7th and 8th dungeon, you kill 2. So, no worries there. And then when I take the doghouse again, I'll end up where I was. And let's get the feather equipped. There we go. I love the skulls for the graphics there, by the way. So this is the 7th dungeon, and I'm going to take a couple warps to get me in a good position. And I'm not going to go to the 7th dungeon's instrument room. I'm going to go to the 8th dungeon's room. So this room is for the 8th dungeon, but because I entered the 7th dungeon, and the game still thinks I'm in the 7th dungeon, I get the 7th instrument. But it's going to put me right in front of the 8th dungeon, which is Turtle Rock. And that's what I want, because I'm going to enter the 8th dungeon normally. I'm not going to do Doghouse for that. Puts me right here. I'm going to do lava walking. So I'm going to pause buffer until I get that frame. Screen transition. It sometimes doesn't work. This one is RNG a little bit. One more frame. There it is. And that one does work. So now I'm swimming in lava, which is just a thing Link can do. And I do another super swim like I did earlier in the lava, which turns off my collisions. So I'm just going to walk right to the 8th dungeon's instrument room. Going out of bounds all the while. And there it is. So that is half of the instruments for this all instruments category. Normally I would do a save and quit here, but because I had to do that earlier, I already fixed the corrupted position data, so I don't need to do a save and quit here. I can go straight to back to town and back to the doghouse.
How do you feel about no save and quit category?
Actually, I should do a save and quit here because of the kill count. No save and quit can be fine if it's interesting. It adds more movement, which can be interesting for games. Like almost got me there. So that has the tail key, which lets you get into the first dungeon, which is not something we're too interested in doing. Don't die. Thank you. There's a cutscene here that I can't skip. This is actually one of the longer cutscenes in the game. But it's nice we're on Japanese because dialogue is faster. We're also on version 1.0 so that we can do all these super jumps and super swims and all this craziness. My health is low, but these bushes here always have health drops, which is great. That is not the equip I was going for. So we're going to do the second instrument now. It doesn't quite matter the order from this point as long as we finish with the first one. So this chest door will also warp you, in addition to the bottommost seashells. Bottom walls will warp you. Puts me in the second dungeon, just sort of a glitched version of it. And I'm going to navigate myself to the entrance of the third dungeon again. So this room might look familiar because it is the same room. So one of the optimizations the game does is that all the instrument rooms, the instrument it puts is always for the dungeon you entered. So if you enter a different dungeon, go out of bounds to a different instrument room, it will still have the instrument for that dungeon you entered until it goes away. So we have done 5 of the 8 dungeons, and things get pretty speedy from this point. The reason we choose the third dungeon to emerge in front of is because look how close it is to the town. It's super nice. Bonk. So now I could do the 5th or the 6th dungeon, it doesn't really matter. I actually just go with whatever I feel like at the time, so I'm gonna go down. Look at those bunnies. So remember, if I touch those bottommost seashells, I warp out, so I don't want to touch those until I get the game's warp data corrupted to a certain state. We're actually in the 4th dungeon right now, if you recognize these rooms. They look exactly the same. That's an instrument room. So we're going to take this warp, and then I'm going to take another warp. Just got to get that warp, and then I can switch rooms. Great. There's some tiles that are impassable, so I had to just sort of navigate around it. So the dungeon we're exiting out of this time is not the 3rd dungeon. Oh boy. That works. We are in the 1st dungeon again. That's actually really bad. And I do not have a boss key there, so we're just gonna have to... That is super bad. Okay, well, run over, but we will keep going. I just have to navigate back to town, which is a little easier said than done. Sorry about that, folks. This should get me there. So knowing the map of the game is pretty nice in case things like this happen, which is unavoidable. Just a little not the best. Hopefully this path is... Yep. So I believe I have to kill 3 more enemies again to reset the kill count. I can do that down here. Nope, no enemies there, but I will get that sword. I think there's a cave that's good for farming enemies nearby. Cool. Alright, we're back on track. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, that kind of sucks just because we were 1 room away from the room we needed to be in, but that's part of why the estimate is really high for this game. So we will do that once more, back to the doghouse, back to glitches. Alright, and we're back to where we were earlier, so that's great. Nope, I need to go down 1 more room. That works. Okay, cool. Alright, we're back to where we were. And our goal is to end up in front of the first dungeon, which we ended up inside the first dungeon, which is not quite what we were hoping for, but that's okay. I'll be a little more careful this time. There we go. And back on track. It's like it never even happened. So we're going to end up in front of the first dungeon. We're going to go get the last 2 instruments now, since we have 6 out of the 8. And normally when you beat the first dungeon, there's a cutscene owl there, but we technically didn't beat the first dungeon. We beat the 5th dungeon. Alright. So this time we're going to go back up. I was a little careful there so as I wouldn't get stuck. Ended up taking some more damage than I wanted, but that's okay. That's enemy doesn't hurt you, it just gets stuck on you. So this category just sort of came around because I was bored one day. But there were a lot of people who helped contribute to it in the community. Dylan, who runs basically every video game imaginable, did a lot of the initial routing. Dren, who is really good at the Oracle games, did some of the routing as well. Like, definitely could not have done the routing alone on this game without their help. And Xkeeper, who manages the cutting room floor, helped me with some of the logistical questions of how does Doghouse work. So he was also instrumental. I'm going to be extra careful again with that jump, and we're going to end up in front of the first dungeon once more, which means the only dungeon we have left to do is the actual first dungeon. And it would be convenient if I could just enter it from this point, but unfortunately things are not that easy. So we have to go do Doghouse again, and I need to heal. The main reason I need to heal is because I will always take half a heart of damage taking that route to the Doghouse. So I need to make sure I have more than half a heart of health. Luckily, there are healing bushes really close by, right up there. I could just do that, and that is enough health to do the last segment of this run, basically. So we are going to go to the first dungeon. I'm going to double damage there, so it's a good thing I healed. Here's a very long path that I have to take down until the room looks different. And our goal is to end up in front of the third dungeon once again, because that is close to town. And then there'd be one more Doghouse segment after that, and we're done, folks, after that. Actually, that was a pretty good segment for the first instrument there, and that is all of the instruments, which is the goal of the category. We can go on to the finale of the game now, which is the final boss. The final boss is actually pretty difficult when you only have 3 hearts of health. Normally, casually, you cannot do a 3-heart challenge. The game requires you to pick up heart containers before you get to the instrument rooms, normally. So, it was never intended to do the final boss with as little health as I have now. So I am going to heal, and what's really convenient is this tree right here has a fairy in it. As long as the fairy decides to fly at me, please. Please, dude. There we go. So you may notice we have the ocarina. Normally, you have to get Marin's Lullaby, or sorry, Ballad of the Windfish, which is right here, but we're just going to skip that. And there's one more item I want to pick up before we finish this, and that is the magic powder, which is for a backup strat in case part of the final boss fails. So with that, let's go right to the final boss. So this path I'm taking now is basically any percent. Well, any percent now is even shorter than it was, but it was old any percent. And we're in the final boss room. This first phase, if you can get a sword hit, you can kill it immediately, otherwise you need the magic powder. Oh, I got it. So I didn't need that magic powder there. Next we have Aghanim. Aghanim shoots balls at you, you shoot them back. The first 2 will always reflect, the next 2 have a 50% chance of being correct. So for the first 2, I'm going to get really close to Aghanim here. And then for the next 2, I'm going to try to keep my distance. And hopefully we get not the blue balls. That was a bad hit, but it worked, so whatever. So 50% chance. Oh, this game loves me right now. That's really good. I'm going to try to stun lock this boss. Nope, that's okay. Took a little bit of damage there. Come back in there. Everybody loves molding, right? Especially if you run Link to the Past. So now this next phase is kind of crazy. It's Ganon. So I'm trying to pause buffer until that fire becomes a bat. Pausing advances 1 frame, using select advances 7. It became a bat and I dropped the input. We're gonna have to pause again for this. So basically I'm waiting for that fire to become a bat. And then when it does, I'm going to do select buffering. Select buffering increases the game by 4 frames, so I'm going to do that 7 times. And then on that frame, I'm going to play the ocarina. And what that does is that freezes the bat in position. And you'll see why that's important in a second, once this fire becomes a bat anytime now. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5, 6, 7, play the ocarina. So what that does is that bat on the top right side will stop moving. And that's pretty important for something you're about to see. Now I just have to kill the rest of the boss. And you're going to end up in that position. Cool, now I just have to hit that boss, last phase. So what happens is the final boss, final form, spawns twice. One of them dies. The game thinks you beat the final boss because of that. Timing's coming up. I'm just going to take the staircase. And time. Okay, that's below estimate. So that wasn't the best of runs, but that ending segment was fairly nice actually, so I can't complain with that. If you were doing the old Japanese timing, you would actually not end time now. You would keep mashing until the final cutscene. But we are done with that, so I believe Bernstein Bears is next.